as we're seeing happen now with the higher courts, in order to reestablish judicial equity when it comes to individuals, or executive functions when it comes to presidential powers. We've been talking about this for a long time now. It's egregious, it's black and white, it's in your face, it's over the top. It's deliberate. We have entered the world where the courts are dictating executive powers. The courts are usurping executive functions. There are no longer separation of powers, checks and balances. There is the judicial branch that has usurped, appropriated, or I dare say expropriated, without compensation and without color of law, the executive branch functions. The best one today, you have to hear the way the courts, or not the courts rather, but quacktivists, we'll call them quack journalists, describe what's going on. The punchline, we won't bury the lead or just get ahead of it. The Supreme Court overturned a lower court's decision to stay Trump's declaration revocation of temporary protective status of hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens. Listen to the way the fake news propaganda is describing it. Words mean something, right? And the subtle manipulation of language, it's good for sophistry. It's good for debating when your adversary doesn't know that you're doing it. Now that I have persuaded you to look for this in this 2-minute clip, look for it, listen for it, understand what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time now.
All right, let's go back to that breaking news we told you about before the break. The Supreme Court has just cleared the Trump administration
I've got to pause it. I'm actually distracted by the muscles on her arms.
All right, let's go back to that breaking news we told you about before the...
That's okay. She's got muscular arms. All right, let's play this out. Viva, shut your face. Bam.
All right, let's go back to that breaking news we told you about before the break. The Supreme Court has just cleared the Trump administration to temporarily end humanitarian parole protections for 500,000 immigrants. The justices lifted these protections from migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez. Camila,
Camila, can I ask you one question? What is the legal distinction between an immigrant and a migrant? I mean, if I may just start it off with immigrants, then she used the word migrant, and then she went back to immigration law, and now she's going to the immigration specialist, this guy right here. Listen to this.
What more can you tell us about this ruling?
Hi, Mugo. This ruling will place 500,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela in legal limbo.
Why do they always do that where they go Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela? Like, do we Cuba? While we're at it, Cuba. What were the three countries? Then we're like
million people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela in legal limbo, and will allow the Trump administration to terminate their parole, legal status, and also their work permits that have allowed them to live and work in the U.S. legally, but on a temporary basis.
So they were offered a privilege on a temporary basis that they knew was temporary from the get-go, that was issued arguably, but not so arguably, unlawfully at a blanket level to people who were here not legally, but made it legal by issuing them temporary protective status, which means it's temporary protective status. And now that the new executive decides to revoke that temporary protective status, a lower court comes in and says, you can't do that. You got to do it on a case-by-case basis. You can issue the blanket, but you can't pull it back. You can issue the blanket, but you can only remove it by cutting out one square after another. Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, Nicaragua.
These are migrants from these 4 crisis-stricken countries who were allowed to legally come to the U.S. under a Biden administration program that was designed to discourage them from crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. But
you have to understand, they were brought here legally through a process that was designed to deter them from crossing illegally. So they literally were flown in, otherwise illegal, then blanket granted temporary protection status, which we know as a matter of fact now, by the way, was given to the Haitians in Springfield, not for temporary protective status humanitarian purposes, but so that they could be exploited by corporations in Springfield, Ohio for cheap slave labor. That's why they were there. I forget who it was that said it, but it was a politician who said they were there because corporations needed the labor. that they couldn't find in Springfield for some reason. Do you know what it's called when you bring in people who can't speak the language so that you could exploit them for forced labor? It's called human trafficking. And the Biden administration was up to its wrists doing it. And now let's take a brief pause from this video for a word from our sponsor, The Wellness Company. Ever wonder why your brain feels foggy even when you're eating, cleaning, and exercising? It might be burnout. It could also be parasites. Groundbreaking research from Dr. Alan McDonald revealed a link between chronic parasitic infections and neurological diseases like multiple sclerosis. Parasites can cause inflammation, nerve damage, and long-term cognitive decline. More reasons to do a full body cleanse at least once a year. The Wellness Company has a solution for you. Ivermectin plus mebendazole, the gold standard parasite solution, now combined in one easy cleanse combo designed to eliminate harmful invaders and support your immune system naturally. Medical grade, not some trendy herbal gimmicks. Fill out a quick intake form online. Get a 3-month supply shipped straight to your front door. Maha is officially here, and the Wellness Company is making hard-to-get medications digitally accessible so you can live your best life. Head over to twc.health/Viva. Use code VIVA for $60 off plus free shipping. Once again, that is twc.health/Viva for $60 off and free shipping. Thank you, the Wellness Company, for sponsoring this video. And now back to the vlog. I'm gonna start. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep talking.
Was under a Biden administration program that was designed to discourage them from crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. But the Trump administration, Mugo, has argued that this policy was unlawful, that it was an abuse of this humanitarian parole policy that the Biden administration used on a very unprecedented scale, and that it needed to be terminated. And now the Supreme Court is allowing the administration to revoke that legal status and now to place these migrants at risk of deportation. The caveat is that some of these migrants, Mugo, may be able to stay here through other means because they have applied for other immigration benefits like asylum or a green card. Cubans, for example, can be eligible for permanent residency or a green card under a Cold War era law. And so those migrants will not be eligible for deportation. But anyone who does not have another immigration status can now be deported from the US. And the administration has made this warning very clear. If you are here illegally, you must self-deport. If not, you could face arrest and deportation from the country.
That's probably kind of the message that Trump is trying to send. I found the clip. I remembered who it was. Adam, corrupt POS Kinzinger, who talked about this. And I remember saying it at the time when he did that interview, where this idiot jackass didn't realize that harboring an illegal alien and lying to authorities who are there to get them could be a crime. Listen to what he describes the raison d'etre of the Haitians in Springfield, or Haitians who speak French, or I don't know if it's Creole. It's not Creole. That's more Acadian. They speak a derivative of French. They're in a town where they don't speak the language. They're in a town that is totally culturally foreign to them. They have obvious issues as a result of this failure or impossibility to integrate, and yet they're being exploited for cheap labor for big corporations. Some might even argue that was what the purpose was in the first place. Give them TPS so you can exploit these otherwise illegal aliens. What did Kinzinger have to say about this? Look at that. This man's ugly, awful face. If there was ever anybody who I would suspect would be up to no goodness behind closed doors, it's this man right here. Listen to this.
This idea that Donald Trump wants to bring iPhone manufacturing here is insane, because how many people are going to want to do a job, screwing little screws into an iPhone? We don't have the people to do it because we do have pretty low unemployment in this country. And now we're deporting every immigrant that could possibly work at that place. Remember the whole eating the dogs and cats in Columbus, Ohio thing? Why were there so many Haitians in Columbus, Ohio? Because they were needed for work in manufacturing, because they needed the employees there. This idea that Donald Trump wants
people to understand this and truly internalize it and digest it. Here is Adam Kinzinger explaining why he supports modern day slavery. According to Adam, we can't build iPhones in America because Trump is deporting all of the immigrants. Now we're deporting every immigrant that could possibly work at that place. He actually said that. Remember the whole eating the dogs and cats in Columbus, Ohio? Why were so many Haitians in Columbus, Ohio? Because they were needed for work in manufacturing. You are a disgusting racist, and I'll just add piece of shit to that, Kinzinger, a proponent of modern day slavery. Just one last time for the road.
Columbus, Ohio? Because they Haitians in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio thing. Why were there so many Haitians in Columbus, Ohio? Because they were needed for work in manufacturing. Ohio thing. Why were there so many Haitians in Columbus? Why were there so many Haitians in Columbus, Ohio? Why were there so many Haitians in Columbus, Ohio? Because they were needed for work in manufacturing.
Why were there so many illegal aliens? Well, we needed them for cheap labor. Why were there so many young kids in there? Well, we needed their small fingers to screw in the screws. Oh, no, that's right. We don't do that here. That's why we ship things out to China to be done. And we couldn't even do it here, even if we wanted to, according to Adam, because Trump's deporting all of the illegals. Holy, sweet, merciful hell. There is a special place in hell for Adam Kinzinger. Glad I found that clip. So what happened today? Oddly enough, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Sotomayor, the two biggest idiots on the Supreme Court, dissented. But what happened today? Supreme Court paused the ban on the revocation of the TPS status. So basically, Trump can revoke the temporary status while this case gets adjudicated. Which propagandist rag are we reading here? The Guardian. Supreme Court allows White House to revoke temporary protected status of many migrants. Oh, they went with migrants. They didn't go with immigrants. I'm sure. Why did they go with undocumented citizens? No, pre-citizens. They should call them pre-citizens. How dare you deport so many pre-citizens? Ruling reverses hold on Trump administration's ending humanitarian parole of Venezuelan migrants and others. Venezuela. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday announced it would allow Trump administration to revoke the temporary legal status of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans. How the hell did it happen in the first place? Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguan migrants living in the United States, bolstering the Republican president's drive to step up deportations. Finally, the Supreme Court comes in and says, in the interim, you can revoke the TPS. In the interim, you can apply tariffs to foreign countries. And no, these low-level judicial hacktivists, quacktivists, jack activists do not get to dictate the executive branch and the presidential roles, the duties that he was elected for. The court put on hold Boston-based U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani. I hate to do this. Indira Talwani. I knew an Indira once. Where was she born? New Jersey. Indira Talwani, Englewood, New Jersey. U.S. state of New Jersey. Englewood was in, that's the city. Indira born is a United States District Judge, District of Massachusetts, Englewood, New Jersey. Yada, yada, yada. So they paused the order, halting the administration's move to end immigration. Yeah, okay, fine. As with many of the court's emergency orders, after rapid appeals brought the case to their bench, the decision issued Friday was unsigned and gave no reasoning. However, two of the justices, three liberal leading justices, Ketanji, KBJ, and Sotomayor, publicly dissented. What was the court botched its assessment of whether the administration was entitled to freeze Talwani's decision pending litigation, Jackson wrote in an accompanying opinion. The outcome, Jackson wrote, undervalues the devastating consequences of allowing the government to precipitously upend the lives and livelihoods of nearly 500,000 non-citizens. Holy crap. I mean, I was, at least she says non-citizens. Why? She doesn't even go with migrants. Illegal aliens, undocumented migrants, undocumented immigrants, non-citizens, pre-citizens, presumed citizens. Jackson also added that it is apparent that the government seeks a stay to enable it to inflict maximum pre-decision damage. Or, Ketanji, for the president to do what he's within his powers to do, what he was elected to do, what he has the discretionary power to do. It was a temporary protective status. It could be revoked. It was unlawfully awarded at blanket levels in the first place to legalize what was otherwise an illegal invasion facilitated by the Biden regime. And now we know by flights. They didn't even want to let them cross the border illegally. They actually flew them in to overwhelm small town America to be exploited for human trafficking slave labor. That's what was going on, period. And Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sotomayor, the biggest idiot on the bench, ratify modern day slavery because they approve of it, because they're the beneficiaries of it. She added those living under parole protections in this case now face two unbearable options. One option is to elect to leave the United States, yada, yada, yada. The other option is they could remain in the U.S. after parole termination and risk imminent removal at the hands of the government agents, or apply for asylum or other protective status if they genuinely need it. To Jackson, either choice creates significant problems for respondents. Go blame Biden then. Don't blame the person solving the problem. Blame the person who created the problem. At a minimum, granting the state would facilitate needless human suffering before the courts, and it would be very profitable for big corporations as well. All right, immigration parole is a form of temporary permission under American law to be in the country for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. Surprised I didn't argue that exploitation for human slavery is significant public benefit. It doesn't offer immigrants a long-term path towards citizenship, but it can typically be renewed multiple times. A report from the American Immigration Council found that halting the program would, apart from the humanitarian effect, be a blow to the U.S. economy. Holy hell, I didn't read this article through to the end, and they're actually making the argument for human slavery. As households in the U.S. where the breadwinners have temporary protected status collectively earn more than $10 billion in total income while paying nearly $1.3 billion. Oh, they pay taxes. Trump called for ending humanitarian parole programs, executive order, yada, yada, yada. I think we can skip the rest of this case. Plaintiffs in this case, a group of migrants granted parole, and Americans who served as their sponsors sue administration officials claiming they violated federal law, the actions of government agencies. Talwani in April found that the law governing such parole did not allow for the program blanket termination, instead requiring case-by-case review. Horse crap. The Boston-based First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals declined to put the judge's decision on hold, and the government appealed. All right. That's it. So, Supreme Court, maybe, hopefully a sign of things to come, dictating, ordering that Trump can be president, and that no, some New Jersey jackass corrupt judge does not get to usurp the role of the executive. Yeah, you can issue the blanket TPS protection status, but you can only revoke it on a case-by-case basis. Thus, we know that we will hand tie, incapacitate, paralyze the system for decades to come. Almost like it was part of the plan.